When your butcher had more connections than the CIA, your grandma was low-key a mob boss. I'm serious. If she lived through World War II, there's a decent chance she broke federal law multiple times. Her crime? Buying a steak. America's at war. And the government decides the best way to support the troops is to ration meat for civilians back home. Each person gets 28 ounces of meat per week. That's less than 2 pounds. For context, that's roughly 4 quarter-pounders from McDonald's. For an entire week, Americans were not happy. So they did what Americans do when the government tells them no. They knew a guy who knew a guy. By 1945, an estimated 20% of all meat in America was moving through the black market. 1 in every 5 steaks sold. Illegal. Butchers became the most connected people in town, more powerful than the mayor, more important than your priest, because your butcher could get you steak. No questions asked. Here's how it started. December 7th, 1941. Pearl Harbor gets hit. America enters World War II. Suddenly, the military needs to feed millions of troops, not just American soldiers, Allied forces too. Britain, France, everyone fighting the Axis powers. The government looks at the nation's food supply and does some math. The military's going to need half of all canned goods, a quarter of all food produced, and a massive chunk of the meat. But Americans love meat. In the 1940s, we were eating way more meat per person than we do now. Steak wasn't a luxury, it was Tuesday. So in 1942, the government tries something cute. They launch a polite pretty please from the government. Share the meat as a wartime necessity. Posters everywhere. Radio ads. The whole propaganda machine. They ask everyone over 12 years old to voluntarily limit themselves to 2.5 pounds of meat per week. It went down in flames. People didn't share. They hoarded. Prices skyrocketed. Stores got mobbed. So in March 1943, the government goes full authoritarian. Mandatory meat rationing. Every household gets ration books. Little booklets filled with stamps. Red stamps for meat, cheese and fats. Blue stamps for canned goods. You want a pound of bacon? That's 30 cents. Plus 7 ration points. Run out of points before the month ends? Too bad. No more meat for you. The system was a total hot mess. Different cuts of meat had different point values. The values changed weekly based on supply and demand. Newspapers published rationing calendars, telling people which stamps were valid and for how long. To prevent fraud, you had to tear the stamps out in front of the grocer. He'd watch you do it. And if you didn't have exact points, no change. You just lost those extra points. Imagine doing that math every time you went shopping. With 4 kids, no calculator, while your husband's overseas getting shot at. Yeah, people were stressed. Here's the thing though. The government set ceiling prices, maximum legal prices for meat. But the military would pay whatever it took. So meat suppliers looked at the situation and thought, why would I sell to civilians at 0.30 per pound when the government will pay me double? They didn't. Meat started vanishing from stores, not because there wasn't enough meat, because it was all going to the military or the black market. By 1943, good cuts of beef were impossible to find legally. Steak? Forget about it. You'd have better luck finding Bigfoot. So the black market exploded. Independent operators started buying livestock secretly, slaughtering animals in basements, warehouses, anywhere the government wasn't looking. The slaughtering process was completely unregulated, unsanitary, dangerous, but people didn't care. They wanted meat. And butchers became kingpins. If you were friendly with your butcher, if you tipped him well, brought him gifts, stayed loyal, he'd slide you a little something extra. Under the counter became a way of life. You'd walk into the shop, ask for your legal ration. The butcher would wrap it up. Then, if you were in good standing, he'd lean in and whisper, "You want something a little better?" You'd slip him cash. Maybe double the ceiling price, maybe triple. And suddenly, that ground beef became a ribeye. Government propaganda films tried to scare people. They made a whole movie called Black Marketing, showing how illegal meat could make you sick. The radio show Fibber McGee and Molly did an episode where everyone who ate black market meat got food poisoning. Nobody cared, because here's the truth. Your butcher had become your lifeline. He had connections. He knew a guy who knew a guy. He could get you what you needed when the government couldn't. He wasn't just selling meat. He was selling normalcy, a piece of pre-war life, and people were willing to break the law for that. The government tried to crack down. The Office of Price Administration, the OPA, was in charge of enforcement. They had 900 inspectors nationwide trying to catch black market operators. Penalties were serious, up to a year in prison. $5,000 fine, that's like $85,000 today. Plus, you had to pay 3 times the value of the illegal goods. In March 1943, 7 meat wholesalers in Washington, D.C. got busted. 6 months in jail each, $27,500 in fines total. The judge said, "Black market operations must cease. Unpatriotic profiteering will not be tolerated." It didn't stop anyone, because customers weren't snitching. Why would they? They needed their butcher, and butchers sure weren't turning themselves in. The OPA admitted that most violations were shabby little under-the-counter deals between butchers and their regular customers. Not organized crime, just regular people trying to eat steak. April 1945. A reporter named Ray Sprigle from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette decides to prove how bad it's gotten. He poses as Alois Vondich, a black market buyer, takes his old truck, a bundle of cash, and just starts asking around. In 3 weeks, he bought over 2,000 pounds of illegal meat, more than a ton. He also secured 10,000 ration stamps for $60. Some were stolen, some were counterfeit. Didn't matter, they worked. His exposé ran on the front page, made national headlines. Time magazine covered it. A grand jury indicted several dealers. The OPA made program revisions. And nothing really changed, because the problem wasn't enforcement. The problem was supply and demand. Americans wanted meat. The government couldn't provide enough legally, so people found another way. It got so bad that cattle rustling made a comeback, like Wild West style. Criminals would steal livestock, slaughter them illegally, and sell the meat on the black market. Sometimes ranchers caught them in the act. Gunfights broke out. In 1940s America, over beef. The black market became so normalized that people joked about it. One woman stood in line at a butcher shop with cash ready to tip. Her kid asked loudly, "Mommy, why do you have to pay extra when you buy meat from this shop?" Everyone laughed. The mum said, "I wonder how we're going to teach our children to be honest after the war when we behave like this." That's the thing. It wasn't just criminals. It was everyone. Your neighbor, your teacher, your pastor. All of them buying black market meat. Because what else were you supposed to do? Feed your kids organ meats and call it variety. Oh yeah, that happened. The government hired psychologists to figure out why Americans wouldn't eat organ meats. Liver, kidneys, brains, hearts. The research found that people thought organ meats were poor people food, low class, unsophisticated. So the government rebranded them as variety meats, made them sound fancy, ran campaigns with recipes. Try something new, it's patriotic. The point values for organ meats were way lower than regular cuts. You could get more food for fewer stamps. But Americans weren't having it. Rich people especially refused. They'd rather pay triple on the black market for a steak than eat liver legally. And honestly, can you blame them? The war ended in 1945. Rationing continued into 1946. President Truman tried to end it. Meat prices immediately doubled. People freaked out. So he reinstated price controls. The meat industry revolted. Producers withheld meat from the market entirely, refused to sell. Why? Some were waiting for prices to go up again. Others were punishing the Democrats before the midterm elections. By September 1946, meat production had dropped 80% from the previous year. There was almost no legal meat available anywhere. Finally, in October 1946, Truman gave up. Ended price controls. Ended rationing. Meat prices shot up. but at least you could buy it. The black market vanished into thin air. No need for under-the-counter deals when you could just pay market price. But here's the legacy. An entire generation learned that sometimes breaking the law is how you survive. Your butcher became the most important person in your life, not because he was a criminal mastermind, because he had connections. He could get things done. He took care of his people. That relationship between a neighborhood and their butcher was built on trust. And yeah, a little bit of crime. So next time someone says, "Back in my day, people respected the law," just remember, your grandma was low-key a mob boss buying black market steak while lying to federal investigators. She was a rebel, a rule breaker, a patriot who loved her country but loved her family's dinner table more. And honestly, that's pretty American. If this blew your mind, we've got more stories like this. Weird conflicts, bizarre historical moments, stuff that'll make you rethink everything you thought you knew. Hit subscribe. Trust me, your butcher would approve.